like in America when the India came out many years ago. So what I'm saying is, do you understand the literal meaning of the word, or the i'lan and the reason? How do you go about it? That's exactly what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is ijtihad that says, guys, it made sense for so many years that no injustice done to either party, that you need some kind of witnesses. But now we have this science that is exactly who and what and when and what, everything. Now, so many Muslim countries with ijtihad in the Sunni and the Shia world have taken this seriously, and it became the procedural way by which crimes are looked into, by which judges judge and sentence. So, that's what I mean ijtihad. So back, they understood those verses, those words to mean not literally for, but rather you need to do everything within your means to affirm, to assert the truth. How do you do it? It's up to you. Based on that, you have this concept in Sharia thinking called siyasa shari'iyya, which is the Islamic concept of, it is the people who decide what is and what is not acceptable or not acceptable based on their own social, political, economic circumstances. Keeping in mind the values of Sharia, there are 5 values, and the objectives of the Qur'an that we just spoke about. There's only one example of how this ijtihad is being carried out in Muslim countries. However, when it came out, they said, my God, no. Are we changing the law? No, let's understand the law in a different way. And there's so many things like that that are being debated in some places where they already decided, like what do you call it, the age marriage in Jordan used to be the age of puberty, when now in Jordan no one can marry under the age of 17. So they studied it based on ijtihad and argued for and against, and ended up deciding for the best health of the girl and the boy in the society, the minimum age should be 17. In some countries they would take it up to 20. If it was in my hand, actually, I would take it up to 2 years in college degree, meaning 20. Why? Not because I want to make it up, because of my understanding of how life now works and operates, and working within the spirit of how the law works, ensuring stability and peace and all of this stuff. I would say 20 makes more sense maybe in the 21st century. But people could argue against me, but that's what ijtihad is. Ijtihad is to have people argue and fight for and against and debate and end up with some kind of, not ijma' consensus, but the majority rule. Yes?
Yeah, so you're talking about how ijtihad is now being implemented more in some places. And you said before how it had sort of stopped, but do you have any reason that it had stopped?
I think I mentioned it maybe indirectly earlier. I said, number one, they thought we accomplished everything with ijtihad. There's nothing new that we are.
But who's we? Because
okay, it's Muslim scholars. It's throughout the world who sort of got to that movement. If I were to write a book that needs to be written, I would call it "What Went Wrong with Muslims in the Last 200 Years." It's a very important question because there's a book called The Sociology of Islam, written by Ali Shariati. It's a beautiful book on sociology. And Ali Shariati argues in his chapter, one of his chapters, that when Muslims fail to diagnose their real diseases, they fail to prescribe the right medicine for them. So in order for us to move forward as Muslims, we need to diagnose what really went wrong, what got us there, in order to know how we can move forward. Again, this is not our subject now, but just to satisfy the question and go back to our discussion, I think so many things went wrong. Number one, arrogance. We became so arrogant about what we were able to achieve worldwide. We became the very largest empire in the world. That's number one. Number two, centralization of power in one place ruling the entire empire. With that centralization came loss of freedom of thinking, more militarized political system that ruled the Muslim world. With that collapse of freedom in colleges and universities where public debates were acceptable, men and women debating, and Muslims and non-Muslims, and it became no, it's only the Muslims, and at one point it's only the men, at one point it's only those who are related to the governing body of that specific community. You see where I'm coming from? So it's a body, it's a group of things that contribute to what went wrong. And not only one thing. Of course, with that comes colonialism too. I think colonialism contributed to the mess that we have in the Muslim world. The best one who writes about this, actually two people, Karen Armstrong, in her book, The Crusades, and how historic events shaped the day's world. And Madeleine Albright has a book, a wonderful book called Mighty and the Almighty. In her first 3 chapters, she speaks about this, maybe better than anyone else, of how colonialism contributed to the moral and intellectual decline in the Muslim world. And what really led to that reality and how we can come out of it. Actually, the way to move forward in the Arab world and in the Muslim world is the freedom of expression, writing, and press. So to bring back our tradition of freedom, where people can debate. And I see that, believe me, I see it in the Arab Spring. I do see it in so many ways. Some people don't like it, I'm worried too. But I do see debates about women's issues, about moving forward in the political system, about democracy, about freedom, about elections. I see a lot of debates, vigorous. Sometimes, my God, if you see Dream, it's an Egyptian channel. It's a quite amazing, vigorous debate back and forth on politics and shura and democracy. And again, keep that word. The clash of ideas is the sound of freedom. The more a clash we get of ideas, public discourse of debate. I went to Pakistan so many times, and I loved how the discourse on issues of women has evolved in the last 8 years in an amazing, positive way, actually. I really mean it. Where it was, where it is, and where it will lead, you know. So people are willing to ask the tough questions, are willing to debate it, and move forward. Anyway, my God. Divine norms in the universe. By that, I mean, in Arabic it's called as-sunan al-ilahiyya, divine norm of what? The Quran seems to give Muslims how this universe functions by specific rules and norms that have to be applied. And if you don't apply them, then you end up in a disastrous situation. The first one, the Quran talks about this, that everything has its own due time. There's so many verses like chapter 2, verse 281 talks about this. So many verses in Surah Yasin, in the Quran, Surah 36 also talks about this. I'm not going further down. In other words, don't give an example of what I mean. In our attempt to understand the future of the Arab and Muslim world, I say to America, please do not rush the process in the Arab and Muslim world. America did not reach to where it is now overnight. America took time, struggled with itself, and America is what I call a project in progress. I hope. And it continues to grow. It continues to grow. The same thing with the Arab world now. You know, I did not expect the king of Saudi Arabia 5 years ago to be calling for an interfaith conference to which he invited Jews and Christians. For you, so what? We do it in America so much, but not in the context of where he comes from. So it is a real, a small, but it's a process there. And they just established an interfaith center in Riyadh. It's the beginning, but it's a movement forward. When I was in Saudi Arabia, I think it was 2004, I wanted to meet with women lawyers, activists. I was told there's not. When I was in 2008 in Saudi Arabia, I met with, I think, 46 or 56 of these female lawyers that had just graduated. So you see that the progress. Oh, women don't drive in Saudi Arabia. I know, and I'm sad about it. But the fact that there were women a few months ago who started going out publicly driving. Some of them were punished. I know, but it's a movement forward. The fact that they could not do it 10 years ago, but they can do it now, because there's a process that is being built to move the people forward. That's what I mean. So back to this here, everything has its own appointed time. Don't trust things. Don't trust. Things have their own appointed time. This could be taken politically, civilizationally, but also personally. You know, I do counseling a lot. You know, a sister who comes to Brother Yahya, I'm 28 years of age, I need to be married, the train is leaving me, and I'm falling into depression. I said, sister, trust me, he's around the corner. He will come just around the corner. Don't end up with depression. He's there, you know. The same thing with the man. Yeah. We all go through that. We all, you know, rush things sometimes. We want things to happen overnight. You don't become a doctor overnight, an engineer overnight, and a millionaire overnight, unless you win the $100 million lottery. That's not of the norms. That's an exception. A civilizational exchange between nations. That's called in Quranic language tadawul al-hadari. That is to say, you have verse 165 in Surah 2, and 139 and 140 in Surah 3 that talk about this. Basically, what it is talking about, no one nation or community can claim monopoly on success. That people contribute to each other's success. I like a book that you all need to read called The Case for Islamo-Christian Civilization. Richard Bullitt, a Catholic guy, B-U-L-L-E-I-T. What's good about the book, what I like about the book, here is a Catholic guy who studied Islam and Christianity and thinks that Christians and Muslims have historically contributed to each other's growth. With not only in Spain, but also in Europe, but also in America. Quite fascinating book to read. What got the world to where it is now with technology? Was it really invented 300 years ago? Or was it built on someone else's work 300 years before? 300 years before, then before, then before. What about the Greek philosophy, Chinese philosophy, Indian philosophy, Arab philosophy, and how people build on each other? So this idea that you find in the Quran, it says it builds or wants us to understand the world as exchange of expertise rather than monopoly on expertise. And you see that throughout the Quran. Not only that, the Quran goes farther into saying, even when it comes to success, today is for you and tomorrow for another community. Look at the British Empire and where it was. The Arab Empire, my God, and where it was and where it is now. There's no Arab Empire, that's it. It's in memories. Look at where America now, where America could be. This is natural. People come, people go, people come, people go. So we need to understand history in such a light as the Quran says in some of its chapters. Number 3, balancing acts of duality in the creation. The Quran seems to say that this happens in politics, but in terms of how the world itself functions. In politics, where it says in Surah Al-Hajj, Surah Al-Hajj is Surah 22, Ayah 40. Quite amazing. The Quran says one of the things that can keep a civilization standing is the presence of equal confronting powers within that civilization. I said, thank God that the world is not run by the Soviet Union alone, or by America alone, or by Arabs alone. Thank God that in America we have this balancing system of Democrats and Republicans and other parties. And if it is one, something will go wrong. The Quran seems to say that what keeps balance is that you have two opposite powers confronting one another. Otherwise it becomes a one-man show. And with one-man show becomes extremism. The Quran seems to address that idea of balancing acts of duality, not only in the creation day and night, but also in the presence of negative and positive, but also in politics and how politics, what functions. I like this because Imam Mawardi in the 9th century wrote a book about this, pushing for the caliph to push for a political system in Iraq that will be built on double party systems. In the 9th century, quite fascinating. How he said that the Khilafah, the Caliphate, will not sustain his power if it is built on one way of thinking religiously, politically, or socially. And therefore, he argued in his book that the way to move forward is to espouse double party political system and double ideology thinking in the society. That you can never espouse one way of thinking. It has to be duality there. It has to be pluralism. They're quite interesting. Taken from this verse that was taken serious, and many people wrote about this. Jawdat Saeed, a very well-known Syrian scholar, he was in Washington a few weeks ago, wrote a book about this verse in the Quran, Surah 22, Ayah 30. The world is built on servitude and being in need of others. That is to say, no one can live alone without the need for others. We're in need of God, but we're also in need of one another. And therefore, no one can live independent of others. A few people recently wrote about public